Well, I'm Darrell, and hi. I'm honored to have a chance to share with you a bit of my story, a bit of my life. I am the wrong person to book for Remembrance Day because, or maybe I'm the right person, because my life is made possible. I get to do what I do because of the sacrifice of so many people who went before us. And I don't know if they thought they were doing it so I could be artsy-fartsy for my whole life or what. Maybe they were thinking more about more basic freedoms than gallivanting around the country making weird things. But I'm here and I'm honored, not only for them, but for all sorts of adults who created the conditions for someone like me to wander through life. And so that's really what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about some of the things that formed who I am here today. And buried in my story is our story. So we'll see how that comes out. Yeah, all right. So I got to pull myself together. I'm part creative, part musician, part technician. So sometimes we talk about the brain being left brain and right brain, and somehow my brain figured out how to balance out. And so there's seasons of my life where I've been the musician, I've been the artist. There's other seasons where I've been the technician or the tool maker, if you will, creating tools for artists. I'm also the son of Mel and Bev Smith, the husband to beautiful Noreen, the father to Coltrane, Lane, and Sadie. I am a keen observer of creative workflows, and I've been delighted to make tools and activate artistic vision all over North America over the years. If you're into Enneagram, I am an achiever with a helper wing. Oh, don't kick that. That's too soon. Well, I'll tell you when chapter 1 starts here in a second. If you're into strength finders, I'm a strategic communicator with activation and relator, which is why I don't do small talk very well. If you know about DISC profile, I'm a high I intuitive. And thanks to Mr. Booth over here, I am also a foodie. I scour the world looking for the most amazing edible art. And my job, I think, on earth here is, as Taylor Mack would say, to dream culture forward. Now, one of the interesting parts about being an artist is that we are, and I want to, I hope what I get to share this morning encourages all of us to realize that we all are operating on some plane of creativity, of creation, of ingenuity. Whether you identify as a fine artist or an engineer or a school teacher, we are solving problems every moment of every day, and that is an act of creation. And I think some of the best creation happens in moments of calamity. Because often when we think about creating something new, we start weaving intentionality and we start really trying to devise something novel or interesting. But calamity, mistakes, are often the thing that allow us to experience our highest potential as a creative. And so I've come to celebrate the calamities in my life because they often led to just unbelievable opportunity. And I hope that comes out in this. All right, chapter 1. So this starts with a weird story. And I almost wasn't going to tell this story because my mom inevitably will watch this video. She's cruising right now. But it's important because the universe played a switcheroo on me day one. I was adopted into the Smith family and at birth. And in my 20s, my Grandma Hill, who went to Oakland's Chapel her whole life, she was a badass, pulls me aside and goes, "Darrell, your mom's never going to tell you this, but you need to know. You are not the first Darrell she brought home." 2 weeks before you, she brought home another kid. And she took him back after 2 weeks. And I guess I was a spare baby or something, or I was, they exchanged that child for me. So who knows what my charmed life would be, maybe it would be even cooler in another family. I don't know. But yeah, right from day one, the universe had something else planned. So age 5, Mom started me in piano. And there they are. I'd build these stages out of Lego. I'd wire them up with thread, and I would say to the universe, if you just made it real, I swear it'll work. Ooh, pull together, D. Mom and Dad supported all my interests. My dad was a constitutional lawyer, so he didn't quite understand the creative stuff that I wanted to pursue, but he supported me, bought me my first sound system at age 6. And we used it at the Christmas show at elementary school that same year, to the chagrin of the principal. He helped me get my favorite synth at age 13, and we built a stage in our basement for the neighborhood to practice for our talent shows. When he got me that synth at age 13, it was a lot of money. It was like $2,000 or something. So it came with a bill, an IOU. No, well, not an IOU. It was a bill, an invoice. Darrell, you owe me $1,800 back for this Christmas present that I bought you. But I got you a job, so you can pay me back. So I started at Tempo Trend Studios. If you're musicians, that name should give you pause, because it's a little bit of a weird place. But I started there when I was 13. Wasn't allowed to touch anything. My job was to wash the windows and vacuum the floors. But eventually I got to sort of be the techie guy there and had a great time. Before 13, I actually had another interesting little opportunity. My mom knew somebody who was creating a craptacular version of a Canadian version of Thomas the Train. And so it was all slides, like this was before the internet and things. So somehow I got cast as the voice actor of the Canadian Thomas instead of Ringo Starr, which was pretty cool, I guess. And but anyways, it was terrible, complete calamity. I was not ready to be a voice actor, but I did get to know everybody at the community TV station at Rogers in Cloverdale there. And so I started volunteering there at age 12. They had to build an apple box for me for the film people in the room, just so I could stand up and reach the cameras and operate it on the weekend. And that was sort of my first foray into production. At 13, I was at PCS, just started in middle school. My parents didn't believe in middle school. They were pretty certain that was a tool of the devil. So they sent me to PCS instead of public middle school. I know that's the right response. It's strange. Everything was the devil back then. Like the devil was in our music. The devil was, yeah. So they sent me to a grade 8 at PCS because it wasn't a middle school. And that same year, I formed a little band with some of my buddies there, and I think we played like Lean On Me at the talent show. It was terrible, I'm sure. But PCS was about to fundraise to build the elementary school gymnasium. That didn't exist when I went there. That's how old I am, yeah. So they got the harebrained idea to make a CD of some of the kids covering songs like Sandy Patty and Silver Wind and stuff like that. Thank you for old enough to laugh at that. And the art teacher, Mrs. Huberts, approaches me and goes, "What, you and your grade 8 band, you should be the backing band on this record." And I was like, that sounds like fun. So in a time before the internet, I went to the Christian bookstore and bought the songs, and I wrote out charts because, Ken Dasso had taught me how to do that over at Central Baptist. And I tried to rehearse this band, and we went into Seacoast Sound to track the backing tracks for all these tunes, and it was a disaster. Like, we were nowhere near ready to be session players, or we didn't didn't know the songs well enough. It was exactly what you expect out of a bunch of 13-year-olds who jam in the garage. God bless Mrs. Huberts for thinking we could pull it off, but it was, yeah. So the engineer, Bob, comes in. He's like, this isn't going to work, guys. But he recognized in me that I had written the charts and clearly knew the material and understood the recording process. So he was like, you come back. The rest of you guys out of here. And so he hired a bunch of ringers, and they played my charts and got the record done. And I started interning there the next year at 14 under Bob. And he worked with Dave Foster, and Dave Reitzes was the engineer. So I got to intern under both of them. I was the last guy trained to buy us a tape machine. And I had a key to the place, so I would bring bands in during the night and record all sorts of people that started production. I'm behind on time here. Okay, so we're moving a little faster now. So yeah, and then I had all sorts of opportunity in my teens to do sound and production at Central Baptist. I was handling all of their stuff. In fact, this chap, Werner Koch, as soon as we landed there when I was about 10, he recognized that I knew more about sound than he did. And so he just let me run it, and then he would sit there just as adults would come by and be like, really, a 10-year-old? You know, like, that's who's running things? And he would just be like, yeah, it's all good. We're good. But he was like, just do your thing, D. Like, I don't know what's going on. So that was great. Same with PCS. I just did everything, all the theatrical productions. And then I was working a little bit for Pacific Audio Works even when I was like, I think 15. So I was doing monitors at Jazz Fest and all sorts of stuff. It was incredible. You know, my folks, I realized in doing this project that I really had a remarkable youth. And I think my father had difficulty relating to it as a constitutional lawyer. Now, he was doing things like patriating our constitution from British Parliament. He negotiated with the Quebecois from leaving the country. Like, he was working on big stuff. And so I think for him, the fact that I was like, put the light rig together for PCS theatrical production, like, it just didn't seem consequential. You know? So I think a lot of my youth, I was like looking for his affirmation and never really got it. But a therapist got a lot of money to help me work through that later. But, you know, doing this project, I realized that they did support me. And like things like we were going to Oakland's Chapel. He took us to Central because he wanted to make sure I had a bigger church to plug into and be a part of things there. So I'm super grateful for that, and I'm grateful to the process to kind of jog my memory that it didn't all boil down to feeling like he never affirmed me. It was in his actions. So now we get on to chapter 2. And there's Dad. He loved fishing, and he would take me out all the time, but I was never allowed to actually touch the fishing rod because he was pretty sure I would blow it when it came to reeling it in. But I allowed him to have a second line in the water, and that made it all worth it. All right. Chapter 2. So I became a young adult here in Victoria, and I wanted to go to Berklee School of Music. That was my plan. As a Canadian, it's very expensive, so my dad suggested another school that started with B, Briarcrest Bible College. Yeah. And I spent a year out of Briarcrest before before they computerized. I met the lovely Noreen there. And because they were a little bit disorganized, I was pretty quickly able to kind of not behave like a freshman. And I ended up taking all of their third and fourth year orchestral arranging and conducting and choral arranging and conducting classes. And it was kind of amazing. But met Noreen at the end of that first year, she was recommended to come to Victoria to study music. And so we came to Victoria, we were dating. And I went out on the road with a bunch of terrible Christian bands and toured for 3 years while she studied. In the middle of that time, the Commonwealth Games came to Victoria. There's still remnants of it around the city. And because my dad was with the government and had part of arranging it, this special event happened, and it was a private concert for the Queen and with David Foster. So David Foster and the Queen in a room, that's it. And they needed somebody who could do sound that had clearance. So that was me, 22-year-old me. And I went, set it all up, and sound checked, and then I went to Noreen's place after, because her place was close to the university. And something remarkable happened. Noreen, being this incredibly emotionally intuitive person, recognized that I had a wonderful candy coating protective shell around my heart, that was protecting me from hurt and pain, but also keeping me from fully being able to love. And so in that moment, she felt the best thing to do was to break up with me after 3 years of being together. So she breaks up with me, and I've got to go back and do sound for the Queen. And so it was exactly the right thing to happen. Not great timing. But man, I cried the warmest tears of my life. I don't know if you have memories of that, of the relative temperature of your tears, but I just all of that had sort of was bottled up, broke out. And so there I was in my tuxedo in the room with the Queen, just weeping as I processed all these years of unprocessed emotion and that. And I made it to the end, wrapped it up, got all the rig out of there, and went over to Noreen's place and just was I just didn't know where to go. And she recognized that something had broke through and took me back, and we've been together ever since. Two other stories from this chapter, then we'll move on to the last one. So I took a job at a company called IVL Technologies, and they make karaoke equipment. And so I got to work in R&D, and this would have been in the 90s. I was training an AI in the 90s on how to process vocals. And anyways, so it was interesting. I spent a lot of time in Japan. I was taken to, I'm going to butcher the name, Tsukiyabashi Jiro. For those of you who watch Netflix documentaries, I think I've had the best sushi in the world. I didn't even know it at the time. And later in that experience at IVL, they allowed me to design some products, and we branded them Electrics and put them out in the world, and they were weird and wonderful, and there might be some pictures of them that come up. Yeah, well, that was the first one I ever worked on. That one implicated me with Cher when Believe came out, and somebody accused her of using auto-tune, and her producer said, no, it was that talker box that I had made. And so she just finally this year came out and said, no, it was auto-tune. But yeah, I was getting calls from Rolling Stone of is it possible that this could be this thing that you made? It was so weird. Anyways, lots of weird implications. Repeater is a looper that I made that I dreamt up. And so Repeater did two things that you would know about. One is Imogen Heap. Her whole first two records were done on Repeater. And then two, Mike Elizondo, who played bass for Dr. Dre, used it to build all of the tracks on Eminem's 8 Mile. So something we cooked up here just for fun, ended up. And that hit me one day when Stevie Wonder called our phone line. And I was convinced it was somebody pranking us because we were just folks from Victoria. Why would Stevie Wonder call us, And he was like, I just called to say I love you. And then he goes, I love your big knobs. And we're like, what are you talking about? And our stuff had really big knobs on them because we thought that was fun. It just went on, and we were all laughing, sitting around the phone. And then he was like, let me give you to my engineer who can probably do a better job telling you what the problem is. We're like, what has happened? So it was this weird life, right? I'm in Victoria, but we're dealing with celebrities and all these folks and meeting all sorts of people, and people using these little things that I cooked up that were just meant to be silly. It was fun. Another thing happened in that time, though. I started volunteering at Lambert Park Church. And I was working with junior high and senior high and doing music ministry, leading the band. So some of you will know some of the culprits of this season. This was guys like Vince Vaccaro, Ted Gowans, Sean Huberts, Johnny Five, Johnny Andrews, Dave Zielinski. These were like the kids that Noreen and I started working with. They were 13, and we just wanted to cultivate music and just excellence in them. And we got to work with them for over 7 years. And do everything. We did Full Circle with them. For some of you old enough to remember Full Circle, citywide worship event. We did the March for Jesus with them. We played Lambert Morning, and then we started noticing that our volunteers who were working with us at senior high and youth, because it was a big program, there was like 800 kids coming on a weekly basis. They weren't really going to church in the morning anymore. They kind of stopped, and this was long before anybody could say the words deconstruction. Like, we didn't know what was happening, but something was happening. So there we were. Oh, I'm over time already. Okay, I got to go faster. But here's where this hits you guys. Randy, Dave, a couple other families, Noreen and I, just were like, let's just start meeting and see if we can do something that these folks would feel comfortable at. And without a manifesto, without divine intentionality, we just started doing what we do. We met around food and conversation and music and art. And that was the birth of the place. Near the end of the place, and before I get to chapter 3 and whip to the end here, there was an evening that kind of culminated everything that I had hoped for artistically to happen there. We had made this record of which we just did one of the songs that actually Noreen sang, the album. But we had this, we were inviting more and more artists to participate and express something as an offering. And I got really connected with the song Yellow from Coldplay. I just thought it was like maybe the gospel story told through a person who didn't know how to relate to it. And so he had just called it Yellow. But when you read the lyrics, it got to me. So we commissioned an artist to paint something, to paint their depiction of that song Yellow. And then we commissioned a videographer to make a video based on the painting that synced with the song. And then we, the band, played the song to the synced video, and it was magical. It all came together. And soon after that, we left for California. So here's chapter 3. I'm just going to give you a couple highlights. We spent, Noreen and I and our family, we raised our family in California. Our 3 kids, 2 of them were born there. Lane was born here in Victoria 3 months before we left. Leaving Victoria was a calamity. I really believe that when some things changed at work and maybe that job wasn't going to be there, that I would not know how to survive. I'd have to go back to Tempo Trend or something. We had just bought our home and our mortgage was $800 a month. And I got worried that I wouldn't be able to pull it off just being a humble musician. So we took this job in California, and I started working for a company called Line 6 doing product design on that. And had all sorts of exploits there. I'll tell you just about 3, and then we'll cut and run. Baby Lane, was sleeping in this room, and across the hall I had my studio. And so we had to do everything so quietly to not wake Lane. And one of the things we did there, a friend of mine, Henry Fleury, who plays in a band called the Butcher Babes, him and I went to work on a metal amp, an amp for guitarists who play metal. And we had to come up with some new sounds that nobody had ever heard. And so there we are, like in the next room, trying to be metal while Lane's sleeping. And he's like, hey, keep it down. And so we ended up cooking up this sound, I think in part because we had to be quiet and we were on headphones, that made into the amp that got used by a band called Meshuggah that ended up starting a genre called djent music. So somehow in our little home at 708 Blue Oak, we invented djent, or the beginnings of it anyways. Working at Line 6 was crazy. I made custom gear for everyone from James Taylor to Dave Mustaine. I was hungry to be mentored, and I was, graciously offered to work with this guy, Bob, who really helped me become fully an adult, I think, at the workplace in my 40s through just some incredible coaching, and I'm grateful for that. So along the way there, I found this book, The Cure. It'll probably come up at the end of this slide loop here. And while reading The Cure, I felt the universe say to me, "Hey, Darrell, if this is as good as it gets, is this good enough?" And I think I had always struggled with a feeling of again, never having the spoken affirmation of my father. And then also feeling that, like, going to California, we were going to become filthy rich, right? And just like rule the world. And so I always felt like there was a bit of a gap between my vision for myself and where we were. And the universe said, if this is it, was this good enough? And in that moment, I realized I'd lived my childhood dream of making gear for artists, and I had this beautiful family, and we were making music all the time, and it was amazing. And something settled in me. It opened up access to satisfaction, and that just bred in me the platform on which I stand on you here today. So now I work with creative organizations, churches, theaters, venues, festivals, immersive installs, film shoots, to activate creative vision, because I kind of figured myself out. I don't need to build empire. I just want to help others. An example of this, there is a video in here that does it, but I don't know if it'll play. I got asked to compose for TED Talks in Vancouver a piece for that would get people from the main theater to an after party that was space themed. And I was struck by the observer theory. I don't know, sometimes astronauts will talk about this, that when you're out in space looking back on the planet Earth, it's very common that astronauts will feel this sense of like the Earth is our home in the universe. It's our nirvana, our Shangri-La. It's like, it's heaven. It's our heaven. There's no other place that has the conditions that we know of to survive besides the Earth. And so maybe it's heaven. And I'd written the song of an astronaut lying on the moon, homesick for Earth. And so that played in the halls of TED. And about 3 weeks later, 2 astronauts who had lived on the International Space Station for years found me through TED and were like, "Hey, we have all the space music. We got everything, but nothing captures what it feels like to live out in space like that piece." So yeah, I mean, I'm delighted that my imagination, that I got to maybe remote view or something happened weird that allowed me to see that. Man, we had so many good times at California jam nights. It was a good time. So let me wrap up and tell you what I learned along the way, and then we'll go home, because now I'm at 30 minutes and that was over. I'm sorry. All right. Man. So this eternal thing got to me. I started playing with the idea that maybe this is heaven, and I don't know that it's true. Please don't think that it's true, but it changed how I live. And for me, it's made me want to be curious again, like a child, and want to explore and get out there and just be present in moments like this around meals. And so that's kind of what I do. Man. Okay, here we go. 2 last things. Why I follow Jesus and why I'm at the place. Because Dave thought I should have something in here that wasn't just the cool stuff I did. So I follow Jesus because he served the moment. He invites us into kingdom, and I think kingdom is an expression of the eternal. It's a shared meal, a moment, creating something beautiful, appreciating beauty, possessing the curiosity to find more. To me, that's my mission on earth, and I think it's a beautiful thing. And why I'm here, I want to sit next to my bestie, Dave, over there. It's a big reason, because this is heaven, because I've come to appreciate that Paul unforks the Bible for me. Yeah, that you didn't know whether to laugh at that or not. But I've been around church my whole life, and I just feel like, I had enough preaching. But I'm just glad that I found you guys. And then I want to participate in this community. And what I observe here is that this community is creative to its core. But I think through our collective trauma with God and those who represent her, we're still trying to figure out what our expression, what our gift, our worship, our response looks like. And so I just think that I'm supposed to be here to support you in that. I don't know that I have the answer, but if I can hold a microphone or strum a chord or make weird sounds or whatever, I would be delighted to do that while we figure out how we respond and how we join the orchestra that is this creation, right? That it's already been made. So I think that's it. There were some other bits, but that was 30 minutes. So thank you for that. Yeah. Any questions? Was there anything worthy in there? Was that worth 30 minutes? Was that okay? Yeah? All right. Thank you.